All right. So no Sal. Here comes the intro.
You're listening to Around Comics. 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 Comics.
And you are listening to Around Comics, a Salus Around Comics.
Wow, you made it work.
Right? Okay, I think so.
Very...
As long as I don't hit end broadcast, we should be fine.
Do not do that.
I am Christopher Niesman. You hear the dulcet sounds of Mr. Tom Caters, and we have a wonderful guest this week. This is one of our Around Comics Under the Influence episodes where we talk about a comic that influenced one of our friends, comic book creators, longtime listeners. This guy's all of those things. He is the one and only, the amazing Jamal Igle. Howdy, sir.
Hi. Oh my God, it's been so long.
The last time I talked to you on this show, I think it was like you and Sterling on for like Supergirl.
Wow. Yeah.
Huh.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been
something.
Without you guys, there's no TV show, right?
A lot. Yeah. Surprisingly enough,
there is a lot from your run in that.
There is.
It's amazing. But yeah, bud, it's great to have you back. We'll get to the comic that you picked in a second, but just in general, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Since the last time we talked, I've got a whole ass teenager living in my house.
We're getting old.
I know. They just turned 15 the other day.
Wow. Yeah. Almost right. So any interest in driving? Or is it one of one of the modern teenagers? It's like, nah, I don't want to drive.
No, because we're in New York City, so Rio doesn't really need the drive right now.
Yeah,
I mean, we're Corinne and I are completely capable of teaching her. But right now it's all because they're an animation student, so it's all like animation and video games.
Gotcha.
And, that kind of thing. And they've rediscovered the Muppets recently, so they've really gotten into the Muppets.
All right. So I'm gonna nerd this up another level since Sal is not here, and I will have to show you a picture of this whenever I can. But I'm a curler, and we went to a curling tournament, also known as a Bonspiel, this last weekend, and it was a Muppet spiel, a Muppet mixed Bonspiel. So I don't know if you can see that.
I can see. Oh, that's cool.
That's me and my teammates at the Chicago mixed Muppet spiel. So I've been swimming in Muppets for the last month, man.
That's very cool. That is very cool.
Never grow up. Curl.
I was at Disney World for spring break, and the Muppets 3D show that they have at Hollywood Studios is pretty awesome as far as Muppet stuff goes. My kids were pretty into it, but my kids love the Muppets. They love watching old Muppet Show episodes on Disney Plus, even though they have no idea who the people are that are hosts. Some of them I barely know. I have to Google them and be like, I don't know who these people are. Like who is this? It's yes, famous mime actors from the late 70s.
Shields and Yarnell.
But I think it like transcends generations. It's weird because I live an odd life. I'm at this Bonspiel, and there are people from their mid-20s to probably their early mid-60s, and these people leaned into this Muppet stuff really hard.
Oh, like absolutely. I absolutely see that. I feel like the Muppets they're like the Warner Brothers characters, like the Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig and Daffy Duck. Like there's an internal logic to their world, and with the Muppets especially, because it's so often like the Muppet Show. Like we talk about the Muppet Show, I have every episode of the Muppet Show on DVD. So,
of course,
when you talk about the Muppets, especially because they break the fourth wall so often, I think that's something that people get into. So I think it's like they're the type of characters that will continue to have a life as long as there are people who care about them.
Yeah, I don't think there's a sell-by date on the Muppets, and that's actually a really good transition to the book that we're going to be talking about. Jamal picked The Killing Joke, by Alan Moore and Brian Bolland.
And my copy.
There you go. And I don't think it has a sell-by date either.
No,
it's obviously it's a classic. It's also John Higgins, which we're going to talk about because I have questions for you along those lines. But yeah, The Killing Joke. What year is this?
86. I want
to
say
a couple years after Watchmen comes out. So Alan Moore is a known. Brian Bolland is obviously a known. So I think this for 1980s. We talk about a lot of the comics that changed the way that
1988.
1988.
Wow, I thought it was early. Wow, I thought it was earlier than that.
Yeah, we talk about those comics that changed comics. This one has some fully formed comic book creators that are recognized as greats in the field doing this, which is maybe a little bit different than Watchmen, maybe a little bit different than Camelot 3000. And these guys are bona fide superstars at this point. But we always kick off, Jamal. Why this book?
So Killing Joke came out during probably like the most formative years that I had in high school. I was going to the High School of Art and Design. I was a cartooning major. And I like the joke, but I think it's really, really true that I'm very spoiled in the things that I was exposed to in terms of comics from very early on. Like I really didn't pay that much attention to comics, like reading comics, or like I wasn't a collector for a very long time. And then once I got to high school and started to take, pursuing being a comic book artist more seriously, that's when I started to really lean into it. So by the time I got into the High School of Art and Design in New York City was around the time when, Watchmen had already been out, Ronin, Killing Joke, Byrne was doing Superman and Fantastic Four, and Ordway was on Infinity Incorporated and Justice Society. So there was just, and then, I get to my first, spending a lot of time in my first official comic book shop, which was Forbidden Planet, and discovering like the Turtles, Rocketeer, Nexus, so that, I mean, anybody who knows my work, you can see the influence that all of that stuff had on me, especially, between, Nexus, Killing Joke, and the Rocketeer. That's like the foundation of my drawing style and what would continue to influence me over the years.
Those are, I mean, Rude and Bolland and Stevens. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment here, man.
Well, it's because I'd already been a fan of Jerry Ordway, but I couldn't put my finger on it before, because I was reading Infinity Incorporated. And I liked it. I was a big, I grew up a big DC fan. Anybody who knows me knows, Superman is, my favorite character.
Yeah.
So, growing up reading, All-Star Squadron and Infinity Incorporated, and then, getting older and being able to buy my own books. Because before that, it was just like whatever I could grab, whatever would happen to be at the newsstand that wasn't like torn apart. So it's just, when you're like 14 years old in 1986, like that's like the golden age of like comics, whether you're like a Marvel or DC or an indie fan.
And we didn't even know it.
We had
no idea. No idea. I was born in 73. And so, I'm starting to buy comics, and it's stuff that, we were, Tom, what was the trade talk that we did? The Kevin O'Neill, martial law. It's like martial law is coming out.
Yeah.
No idea.
Right.
Just no idea.
Just weird stuff. Just weird stuff was coming out.
Absolutely.
Just like it was still economically feasible.
Yeah.
For weird stuff that wasn't gonna be a TV show, or to come out like just weird like things that didn't fit like narrative, like what you would think now of like this must be this long and it must be like digested in this length of time. There's 6 issues in this story, it was just like freewheeling kind of all over the place.
Well, and that kind of comes to, back to Killing Joke is that, I mean, it's a graphic novel, really. Yeah. It wasn't, Batman 4, 21, 22, and 23. This was, and Alan Moore even talks about it in the foreword of the Absolute Edition, of just corresponding with the co-creators and referring to it as this Joker graphic novel thing.
Right.
And so it doesn't have, it's not a 22-page story.
No.
And it's not a Batman story. Not really.
No, not really. It's a origin of the Joker. It's not the definitive origin of the Joker. Although,
do you fall into the This Is an Elseworlds story?
No, because we dealt with the fallout from it. For the last 40 years, we're still kind of dealing with the fallout from it. I mean,
right?
Barbara may be, walking around with a spinal implant, but she did get shot by the Joker.
So it's like
to be a part.
It's all canon. It's do we want to get into that?
But that's the thing. For me, continuity is BS.
Yeah,
like continuity. The continuity is only what you decide it's going to be. So I think it's better that way in terms of just like the overall like comic book narrative of any existing universe. You shouldn't be like completely tied down to the way things were produced in the past. You can reference certain things from older stories, but they don't always fit into the same cultural zeitgeist anymore. There are very few individual Batman stories like Killing Joke that stand the test of time, that in and of itself is a complete beginning, middle, and end in a single volume. Because that's the way they did it. That's the way they designed it to be. There is a ambiguous ending, but it's an ending. And it's just, for me, it's the near perfect package for that kind of story. You have an incredibly well-written story that is moving and psychological and disturbing all at the same time. And literally some of the best work that Brian Bolland has ever done in a very long career. And that's difficult to say considering this is Brian Bolland.
But for American comic book fans, I mean, we kind of missed the first half of his career.
This is true.
He did so much stuff, 2000 AD, and he comes to the American audience and he's this fully formed master, basically doing this stuff. And he's kind of like, for me as a he's in that camp with Art Adams, that everything he does is amazing. There's just not enough of it.
This is
right.
True. This is very true. Yeah, but you can understand. I mean, you can understand in both of their cases. It actually is really funny because I was talking to Roger Stern last weekend, and we were talking about Michael Golden. I put Michael Golden in that same camp, where Roger was telling us about the time they tried to put Mike on Doctor Strange, and figured out very quickly there was no way that you were going to get
you weren't going to get enough issues.
A monthly Doctor Strange book out of Mike Bolland the way that you wanted it to look, especially at the time that he was doing it. They're just some people who I would put. I mean, I put Adam Hughes in that category. I put like Travis Charest in that category. Also, like it's going to take forever.
Sean Murphy was that guy, for a long time. Talking, Batman, and then he's able finally to get this one, like imprint that's like, okay, I'm gonna get up kind of steady diet of Sean Murphy now. Whenever it comes out, I don't have to look too hard for it.
Well, he filters it with a lot of other really talented people too, so that helps. There's not, he can kind of spearhead the whole thing and do it that way, and then you're getting your taste of the Batman White Knight universe.
Sure. Now, whenever you first read Killing Joke, and I know for a lot of us that kind of read it when it came out, it's hard to peg this stuff down. Were you already familiar with Brian Bolland as No. Because I remember Camelot 3000 coming out before that, and loving that, and that was one of the first like artist driven books that I sought out.
Right.
But I honestly don't remember picking up Killing Joke for either the writer or the artist.
Right.
I mean, there's also a time when you probably didn't care.
Well, no, I mean, it's not that I didn't care. I knew about Camelot 3000, but I'm not a huge sword and sorcery guy, and I thought that was
that's what it was.
I thought that's all it was, really. And I had seen Bolland's work, but I wasn't that familiar with it. Like 2000 AD was not on my radar at all, and I was just like, back then, especially, like, Byrne was my favorite artist. But if you're a comic book guy and you're trying to draw comics for a living at that stage, it was Byrne, it was Art Adams, it was Larry Stroman, on Alien Legion, and Chris Warner on Alien Legion.
That was oh God, who's the other artist on Alien Legion besides Stroman?
Well, Chris Warner was first, and then Larry Stroman, and I think Cam Kennedy did some as well. I could be wrong.
Here, I got to show you one of these. You're gonna love this.
All right.
It's one of my favorite books growing up with Alien Legion.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, baby. There's the boy. There's Jugger Grimrod.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite pages.
Alien Legion, a Chris favorite.
It is a Chris favorite.
It is a Chris favorite. Oh, it's been a Chris favorite.
Hey, do either one of you have the Absolute edition of Killing
Joke? I do not have the Absolute.
I do not. I just have my. Chris. This is literally probably like the 7th copy,
right,
of this book that I have owned over the years, and it is beat to hell.
Well,
I have it in the Alan Moore. I have it in the Alan Moore trade of all this DC, like the sort of like DC universe of Alan Moore, and I have like the original issue somewhere in a box.
Yeah.
So the coloring I wanted to talk about, because it's fascinating. Have you seen or read the original Higgins colored?
Yes.
So it's I'm not going to say it's a different story, but the coloring in that original I love. I think it is so rich and warm, and it's just a beautiful use of color, and you can see, it's he colored Watchmen, and you see a lot of the same techniques being used there. And then the one that I think most people at this point are used to are the Brian Bolland colored version.
Which feels, and this is nothing against Brian. I love Brian and I love his work. It's different.
It's crisp.
You're looking at a different sensibility.
Right.
And then on top of that, he's looking at it with distance. And seeing, like, he's had like 30 years to think about how he would do things differently, and then he finally got a shot.
The thing about the newer version of the coloring is it always struck me as like slightly amping up the creepiness. To a degree that I didn't. What I always liked about the original coloring is that it had I guess to me it had more of an ambiguous like nature to it, of like, because I think Bolland at times can be, his art style is creepy. Like the way the way he renders faces and the way like people's expressions are, there's like a natural sort of like creepiness to when he does that. And that boy ain't right. Yeah, but then with those colors, it's like almost like a little too much. It's almost like ambiguous. It gets like, just for me, I mean, I can understand. I mean, they're well done. It's just always like, I'm always like, this, like, I don't know. But I feel that way about a lot of recolored stuff too, because I'm always like, I feel like, I don't know. There's something about this that feels not, I don't know. Like,
the way that I think about it like cinematography. Where, you have somebody like, so take Vittorio Storaro, who has a very distinct color palette and cinematography style. If you were to take, I can't remember the person who does like the cinematography for Tim Burton, but if you were to take the cinematographer for Beetlejuice and put him on Apocalypse Now and say, I want you to like, it would be a completely different animal.
There's just like a little thing to it where like, and part of it too is like, when you're familiar with the original and the resonance of whatever emotion is created by the mix of the color and the art, and like, that's how you remember, that's how you experienced it. And like that, because color has a huge effect on your, how you the feeling, not like tangible necessarily storytelling things like plot points, but like how you can feel about a scene, or how you like interpret, like, what am I supposed to be feeling here? And then when you change that a little bit, it's like, it makes a difference. It's I think the distance thing's interesting too.
It's all about mood, Tom. It's all about, I think that's the big difference. It's Higgins had very atmospheric coloring. And I think a lot of that was limited by technology at the time. But at the same time, and Jose Villarrubia does this thing on Facebook where he looks at like recolored artwork and like different publications and says, this is not what you do if you're going to like recolor something. And I pay attention, because over the years, as I've worked on my own coloring for my own work, and really started like playing with mood with certain pieces and lighting and everything else, I always imagine like, the opportunity, if I ever had the opportunity to go in and recolor something that somebody else colored, one of my older projects that somebody else colored over me, it would be a completely different animal, because I have much different sensibilities, and then the distance thing that I was talking about before, also like that distance, that removed distance, that changes your perception as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, we were just talking about this with American Flag too.
With like
where it was like, oh, these, like, I forget how they label them. Well, we were literally just talking about this like a couple weeks ago, where I was like, I actually think the limitations of technology kind of helped and kind of softened some things that are a little harsh in like the crisp, like the most crisp version, while technically it's beautiful to see like that level of detail. Emotionally is kind of like, oh, this is like feels a little different to like
I think you just
like this.
Yeah, you just described the two versions of this book. I think the Bolland art and coloring is technically perfect and beautiful,
right?
But the Higgins colored version, there's more depth to it.
Yes, there's a different mood and atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's like it gives you a little more room, I think, to like figure out how you want to feel about it. You know, like it gives you a little space in there, you know, like like, oh, okay, like, yeah, this is creepy. I mean, I love Boland's art, and I just love like in this book how he's able to like make the Joker like physically repulsive and creepy and just very like, but very real, right? Like not sort of like he walks that line of like his art always felt to me, and I'm not the greatest describer of art. Always felt to me very like real, like physically, like the people, it exists within like real space. Like when he draws the Flash, it feels like that's a human, you know, not like a superhero, but like that's a person, right? And so he draws the Joker like a person, you know, like that's like, oh, that's a person with this like grotesque sort of like look on his face and like way of like looking, and it just always has creeped me out.
I absolutely agree. I think especially like when you look at Bolland's version of Batman, especially like for the time, like there are folds, there are wrinkles. The cape has this weight to it. You know, there's, you know, you feel like one of my favorite sequences is when Bruce is in the cave. And you know, he's got the mask off and he's looking at the back computer, and he's, you know, pulling the glove, like this glove off of his hand. You can just see like it coming off the knuckles, and then Alfred takes the cape from his shoulders, and there's just like there's this gravitas to even Bruce Wayne. Like there's this weight. There's like he stands, and there's like this nobility to the figure. You know?
Oh yeah.
It's absolutely like, I love that. And then you contrast that with, you know, Jim and Barbara at home. You know, Jim's cutting, you know, he's got his scissors as he's, you know, cutting out articles.
Grandpa Jim.
Exactly.
Grandpa Jim.
You know, the tongue sticking out of the corner of his mouth while he's like trying to put the glue on the back of the, you know, that's the kind of stuff that I fell in love with, you know, as a teenager, and wanted to be able to emulate that level of acting.
Yeah. The only part of this book that felt really dated was this scene, because Barbara is like a 1960s housewife.
As well, she should be.
Hey, there's Sal. Hey,
that was my favorite part. Finally,
well, it's well documented. I have a thing for 1950s housewives, so you know.
Yeah, there we go.
What can I say?
That's your thing. Yeah. You're like, finally, someone's doing it the right way, the correct way.
What's happening, fellas? I didn't mean to interrupt the conversation.
Oh no, we're just hanging out, you know, talking comics, the usual.
Nice.
Killing joke.
I kind of jumped in when you're talking about the coloring, and there is something about like Boland's coloring is more correct, but it's not nearly as fun. You know, like the psychedelic weird carnival colors that Higgins did in some of that stuff, like it adds to the manic Joker feel of that book. And Bolland's amazing, obviously, but
well, yeah, and it's weird to kind of say it that way.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to what we were talking about. I'm looking at it with distance as well, because I was a kid when it first came out. We all were,
right.
And here I am at 50, almost 51, having worked in the industry for like 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And thinking of like looking at the stuff and thinking about it from the technical aspect, but still, like, I look at this book and I'm 15, 16 again, because it's such a big part of who I am, who I've become creatively.
That book took huge swings.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of what was, we can say things like groundbreaking or whatever, but at the time it's like that was the Joker doing like truly heinous things as a psychopath would do them in that world. Of course, Barbara Gordon isn't safe. Of course, Commissioner Gordon isn't safe. Of course, he is fucking insane.
Right.
And it's like they actually went there with it. And there were repercussions, which comics aren't always really well known for.
No, but I think that was also part of the becoming zeitgeist for comics as well. That kind of started with Ronin and continued with Dark Knight and just
Watchmen.
I think it was just sort of like a natural evolution to where things were going at the time. I think that as much as I like to think Dark Knight had like this huge influence on who Batman is even now, how Batman is presented in media even now. I think Killing Joke had a much bigger influence on the Joker as a character, because
I mean, you still see people. I mean, I can't look at anything that Scott Snyder has done over the last 5, 6, 7 years with the Joker and not think of the it's all just sort of like a love letter to the Killing Joke.
And then he'd probably be the first one to admit it too.
Yeah.
How many times do you see that T-shirt walking down the street?
I just saw it the other day. Right. Just saw a guy wearing one the other day. Yeah.
I just went online to look at remind myself of how different the coloring is, because I'm always like, and it's funny because it's like, I think the thing about the distance and being like, as the artist, in hindsight, this is the correct version of coloring it.
Right.
It's funny. Whereas I wouldn't have colored it that way. Like, makes it kind of crazy in a weird way, where it's like, I don't know how to feel about this in a weird way, because these colors are so crazy. Yeah. It's so all over the place.
I think it's brilliant.
Well, I mean, even in current terms, it's like if you gave the same book to Laura Martin and Marte Garcia, you would get two completely different results.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
It's all about choices, right? Like, I mean,
absolutely.
He made his choices and what he, how he wanted to contribute to that story, and the colors. We don't talk about colors enough, I think, when we're talking about storytelling, but this is a great example of how different this same story can be based on just the coloring. Like, absolutely. It really,
is there a Steve McNiven without Maury Hollowell?
I absolutely agree. I've been working with Chris Sotomayor on Deadly Dads, and he's been colorist on that, and a couple of other things that I've been doing recently, and it's a completely it's a different, working with every colorist that I've worked with have been super talented, but the thinking process that some people have is so I don't think in those terms, even when I color myself. I see my work one way and they see my work in a completely different way, which is not a negative necessarily, but the way that I tend to veer more towards naturalistic, where somebody else will get much more explosive and much more experimental. And I think that's kind of like the same thing here between Higgins and Bolland. Like Sal was saying before, is that the carnival atmosphere of the color that Higgins does versus the technically correct, well lit, again, it's the difference.
Boland's a little bit of a sports car, and Higgins is a little bit of a party bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly it's the difference between like an episode of Law and Order and Dick Tracy.
Okay. It's all there.
It's all there, but it's lit so differently. It's seen in such a different way. I think using Batman movies as an analogy, the atmospheric shift between a Tim Burton Batman movie, Batman and Batman Returns, to Batman Forever,
Schumacher,
and Batman and Robin, it's not subtle. It's like somebody strapped a piece of like a stick of dynamite to a spray paint can and just chucked it into a room just to see what would happen, and suddenly you went from this like dark gothic browns and grays and and to just like pop art.
It's like a tweed suit and a and a zoot suit. You know what I mean? Like it's just you have this like nightmare kaleidoscope quality to the original coloring, and then like we said, it's technically it's great, but it's a weaker decision it's a weaker choice. It just doesn't give you as strong of an effect visually when you're
I was saying that it almost like, to me, it always tips the direct creepiness too much of like making it too clear, like almost making it too real. Whereas the original had more like there's like a dissonance in a space of like
it's a fantasy almost. It's a it's a nightmare.
How am I supposed to feel about this? Like this is thing happening, but it's like colored in this like way that makes me feel like I shouldn't be thinking of it as like this horrible, like real, like
a documentary. It's like a documentary.
And
I think like in some ways that because the story sits it sits outside of continuity, right? Like it's its own sort of thing.
We were talking about that. It's like a little, I think it's got 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, not at this point, but I think at the time, I don't know.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
at the time it wasn't, right? Like, I think now but I think like that coloring gives it almost the excuse or the get out of jail free card of like it's a fantasy, it's a nightmare, it's a nightmare scenario, it's not real. And then when Bolland colors, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is real. This is really happening. Like it's almost like subtly or psychologically, it just kind of gives you that get out of jail free a little bit of like, oh, this is a fantasy tale that Alan's telling, right? And Brian are kind of a thing, but
have you guys? I think it was.
yeah. Well, I think I'm still convinced like Alan Moore, a lot of his work at this time was a reaction to not being taken, like comics not being taken seriously, and him wanting to be like, no, fuck you, I'm going to make you take us seriously, right? And it is almost like an overcorrection, like he just is like, no, I'm going to take all these things that you think are fun, the Bam Pow Batman TV
I'm going to shoot that bitch,
and I'm going to give you real darkness, because I mean it's just like you look at like what he's done in most of his most successful stuff is re-examining the point of view of these characters. Like for decades they were this fun and we saw them in a certain way, and his thing was always like, well, what would it be like if that was a real human being? Like, what would a real human being that dresses up in a costume, or a real killer that dresses up like a clown, what would that person really be like? And, he kind of tried to give that to us.
I agree with that. I think that's been a boon and a bane for at the exact same time, because I think lesser creators took the wrong lesson.
Oh, for sure.
And you know, it pushed things to a point where it was, we were kind of teetering. Like the industry was kind of teetering in terms of public perception, because we had gone from the bam pow biff sort of idea, which wasn't really completely there anymore by that point. Like even before,
not in comics, but outside of comics, like the outside view, I think.
I think it's the outside view became tainted because of not just because of Killing Joke, but because of books. Well, that whole milieu of books that came out around that time, where everybody was trying to up the ante. Like everybody had.
Well, it's funny. I got
Grimmer.
I got served up an article about Alan Moore talking about. It was funny because I was Googling information for this week, because I was just trying to remember, background and what was going on in Batman comics at the time. And Google served me up a story about Alan Moore talking about his own views and hindsight of this book. I was like, oh God. Like essentially that was like, I opened a door to all these people who came afterwards who didn't took it too far, didn't understand what the point of it was. It was just he obviously has many mixed feelings about many things he's done in comics, but it was interesting because he kind of said the same thing. He was like, I did this, and in hindsight, it perhaps opened the door to a bunch of things that I didn't intend that was this is how you do comics now. This, which it wasn't.
It's a Tarantino moment. It's Reservoir Dogs.
It's a one-shot Batman story. Yeah, that's kind of not in continuity at the time. It wasn't in Bat. It was here's this thing.
Well, that's
it was it's oh shit, this is now. Right.
Think about this, the sheer, the few number of issues of comics that Watchmen, Dark Knight, The Killing Joke, and the amount of seismic shift that those had on the industry, and everybody trying to follow suit, everybody sort of making a copy of a copy of a copy, and it.
Well, and not just the industry itself, because when you think about it, if Moore and Miller had not done their books, Batman as we currently know him would not exist. Burton's Batman movie would not exist. Everything has come from that, from Burton's Batman to Schumacher to Nolan to Zack Snyder to the Batman to Arrow. Arrow would not have been on the air for 10 seasons if they had Oliver Queen running around in a Robin Hood outfit.
The idea of the Joker being this character, you have to remember there was a time where you wouldn't see the Joker for a year or two. He wasn't in Batman all the time.
No, he wasn't for years until the Joker's 5-way revenge.
Yeah, he wasn't this constant figure of having that sort of pop culture resonance with a certain which is interesting to think about in hindsight of so much of that comes from this visually and
was he even really considered that much more of import than any of the other, than the Penguin or the Riddler?
No,
at that point, you know what I mean?
I think a little bit in the 80s,
probably.
a little bit, but not to the degree now where it's like obvious the Joker is like, you know, and I think the Nicholson thing has something to do with that too. You know, like obviously like that, like the looming pop cultural resonance of the Batman movie.
He was Batman's Lex Luthor at that point.
Yeah, and it was like, but to think about just visually how prominent the Joker is, just like when you go to a convention.
Right. He's got what? He's got 4 books of his own right now, I think.
Yeah,
and has had,
you know, right now sitting somewhere going like, oh God, what did I do? Like, too many Joker books.
So well, Jamal, it's like serious question here, because you had talked about it earlier. You are an unabashed Superman fan. Yeah. He's your favorite character. You've done the Superman and Superman family very, very well in your career. This is one of those comics that kind of turned comics down that path that I think really annoys you with Superman, of when Superman goes dark, right?
Yeah, but it's weird. There's like, for Batman, there's kind of a distance. Like, I don't have the same, you know, the same passion. I like Batman as a character. I don't think I have the same passion for the character.
Okay.
But
you know what this book did to your guy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And I absolutely recognize that. I completely recognize that, you know, for a classic Batman fan. So like one of my favorite runs of the Batman titles of all time is Mike W. Barr and Alan Davis on Detective. Like, to me, that is that run, Batman Year 2, Full Circle, like that version of the character is seared into my brain more so than any other. I miss the capsule belt. I love seeing Dan Mora draw, you know, World's Finest with like the oval and the capsule belt and that whole aesthetic. I love, and he does it so well. And I love that version. I love that version of Batman.
When you said Mike W. Barr, did you see Tom perk up?
Do you think Batman, I mean, in this particular, in the Killing Joke, I don't know that Batman's that much darker than he had been.
He's not.
You know, he kind of is, you know, he reminds me very much of Neil Adams' Batman.
He's very much, for lack of a better term, he's the straight man. In the whole affair. He is the, everything happens around him, and he's trying to figure out why all this is happening.
Yeah.
You know, from a psychological standpoint. And I think that's the thing. That's one of the things that I think a lot of people tend to forget about this story, is that it really is a psychological examination of, you know, what causes somebody to fall, what pushes somebody so far, because it's never one single event in the story. It's a series of events, you know. This guy.
Oh yeah. I mean, to a point that you're very sympathetic for him.
Yeah, he's a failed comedian. He's got a pregnant wife. You know, he's working a shit job at a chemical factory. He hates the fumes. He hates the smell. He doesn't want to be there anywhere. He's just looking for a way to get his family, his burgeoning family, out of this slum. And somebody comes to him with a deal. And then what happens? His wife dies. His unborn child dies. And then he's still stuck having to commit this crime. He's being pushed into, and
then because it's comics, he goes into a vat of chemicals.
Yeah,
and becomes
exactly.
a Joker.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, in that idea of the Joker trying to prove this point, trying to see if other people will break the way that he broke, you know,
almost trying to prove it to himself that
exactly
because it portrays him very much. I mean, he's kind of a loser. I mean, he has certainly very bad luck, but he also is not
he's not taking responsibility.
Exactly. And he's looking to prove that it's not his fault.
Right.
That it's everything that happened to him, it would happen to anyone.
Absolutely.
Anyone would turn into the Joker. And that's kind of the joke, right? Like that's, but so have you guys talked about the ending at all?
No, not yet.
No.
Okay. So I'm always curious what people think, because there's, obviously it's sort of obtuse. We don't know exactly the last, couple of panels of the book. What is your opinion on what happens in those last few panels?
Are you asking me directly? Because I will tell you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it is. I think it's pretty straightforward. They're just laughing. They're just sharing a moment. It's like Holmes and Moriarty at Reichenbach Falls. They're almost outside of themselves. They're not in these roles anymore. They're not the Batman and the Joker. They're whoever the Joker is, whatever you want his name to be. And Bruce, two people who've lost a lot, who've sacrificed, their entire lives to be these things, sharing a bad joke and just having a moment of laughter, and it's, you can almost, you can hear the sirens in the distance, and that's it,
So do you feel like they just go their separate ways at that point? That it's just
no, I think Joker probably goes back to Arkham, and the cycle starts all over again. But
yeah, it's always kind of debated, like what happens in that moment, and I, it's funny. Like every time I read it, I have sort of different perspectives on it. The joke itself, like what they're laughing about, and that the final joke that he tells.
It is a funny joke.
Well, it's a funny joke, but it's also it exemplifies like we're two crazy people in a crazy world.
Yeah.
And that's what they're laughing about. They're not laughing about the joke. They're laughing about the fact that they realize
this is crazy.
This is crazy. But we're no more crazy. We're just dealing with the crazy a little differently than everyone else deals with the crazy. Or we at least realize that it's crazy.
I mean, it is crazy. He's a 6-foot billionaire running around in a bat in a costume that doesn't even really look like a bat.
But I always felt the same. I don't know. When I first read it, I was always like, oh, he just walks away. Like they just sort of go, and as you said, the cycle kind of continues. But there's been people that are like, oh no, Batman kills the Joker.
Well,
it's
like, oh my god, he shot Barbara and he tortured Jim, and he can't just. Why is he laughing?
Can't just let him walk away.
I've always just sort of like existed in the I don't know ishness of it,
right.
Of like you don't know, like that's why they ended it that way. Is like it's not like defined exactly what happens. Like they don't show it right now. I've never been one when I've heard that for the first time when someone's like he kills him. I'm like, what? Like that never crossed my mind as like what happens in the end of it until I got on the internet at some point and someone brought it up and I was like, oh, I never thought that was what happened. But I don't know, and I've always just kind of embraced that. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what what happens in the next frame or like if there's the next page.
Right?
Well, yeah, it's almost like a comic nerd Rorschach test.
For sure. That's
what do you see?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I was always just like when I heard people that was the theory, I was always like, what? I was like, oh, okay. Like
I was the same way.
Yes.
I didn't really think that hard about it. Like I was like, it's it's ambiguous. It's supposed to be ambiguous.
Right.
There isn't supposed to be any kind of like definitive answer because that's the whole point. He says it earlier. We're locked in this, suicide course. If we don't change tonight, we're locked in the suicide course. Yeah. That's exactly what Batman the Joker are, and it will go on forever.
And the Joker says it. I've done horrible shit. It's way too late
for that.
For that. Yeah. There's no.
I will rehabilitate you.
Yeah.
That's so Nick Lindsay asked in the absolute Killing Joke as an extra, does DC provide an interview with Alan Moore about what happens at the end? Yes and no. There's a ton of back matter in this. It's one of those few absolute editions. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm really glad I bought this because it has the Bolland colors, then it has the Higgins colors, but it actually does it on newsprint. So there's different stock in the book. Really? So it's newsprint, which is very cool. And then it has the full script. And then it has a foreword by, I believe, Brian Bolland. No, Tim Sale. Tim Sale does the intro. And then there's a great John Higgins piece in here of him talking about the coloring. So if you have not got the absolute edition of this, it's one of those that it goes beyond shelf porn. And I think it's actually a really, really nice deep dive into the graphic novel.
Nice.
And there's a bonus story in it by Bolland as well.
Yeah, and that's also in the deluxe version.
Oh wait, is that the Batman black and white story?
No, it's the one with him as the artist.
Oh yeah.
Which it's I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's that bonus story, which he must like drawing himself because he does that a lot. So that's so Jamal. Before we leave here, we got to catch up on the many activities of Mr. Jamal Igle. First of all, thanks for coming on. Thanks for bringing the Killing Joke. It was awesome to go back and revisit this. I honestly hadn't read it in a long time.
It's my pleasure, man. I'm glad you guys invited me back. It's been a lot of fun.
No, we just can't let it be like another. It's got to be like what 8 years. Yeah. When were you doing Superwoman?
That was like almost a decade ago.
Okay, that's when that's when I talked to you in Sterling last. So catch us up. What are you doing now, man?
Oh man, well, I mean, I've just been busy. I've been working with Scott Snyder on a series called Dudley Datsun and the Forever Machine. It's on Comixology now. Just finished the 5th issue, and then that's going to print in the fall through Dark Horse. So the first, and then I've been working with Tom Peyer for the last few years on a series that we created called The Wrong Earth for Ahoy Comics. So for The Wrong Earth, it's funny that we're talking about Batman because The Wrong Earth, like, it's basically, for legal reasons I can't use those names, but it's basically if you took a Silver Age-ish,
a Dark Knight
hero and his darker
boy wonder,
his darker counterpart from another universe, and you had them swap universes and have to deal with each other's villains and sidekicks and malls.
And that sounds hilarious. That sounds really fun.
And then in the second series, which is called The Wrong Earth, Night and Day, they team up and have to go to a third universe where they face another version of themselves.
Oh, okay. I got to pick that up. That sounds really fun.
So we've been.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah. So we're going to be doing because this is also the 5th anniversary of Ahoy Comics. So we're going to be doing a 2-issue Wrong Earth story for the 5th anniversary. And then the rest of the books. So there are 4 trades of The Wrong Earth available right now. The original series, Night and Day, which picks up a year after the first series. And then we did a prequel called Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man, which was written by Tom and drawn by Russ Braun. And then we did a series of one-shots. So we got like Mark Russell, Gail Simone, Mark Waid. We got on the artwork, we got like Fred Harper, Leonard Kirk, just a whole slew of like Bill Morrison. does sort of this does the art, most of the artwork on Gail's issue, where they end up on this Archie like universe.
Nice. And I'm gonna tell Gail that you picked Killing Joke as your comic, because I'm pretty sure she hates this book.
Oh, I know for a fact that she.
Of course she does. Of course she.
No, I don't.
I don't know why she would hate it. It's books like this that launched her career. I don't know why.
Listen, I completely understand anybody and everybody who does not like this story. A lot of it is a product of this time. It is very misogynistic, and it is.
It's okay, because this is a follow-up episode to Tim Seeley doing Cherry Pop-Tart number 10. You're gonna look good no matter what, man.
So what else? Geez, what else is going on? Okay, so I'm a college professor.
Professor Igle.
I am Professor Igle. Yes, I teach I'm part of the Bachelor of Fine Arts and Comics department at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. So
wow.
I teach second year principles of cartooning. I just finished my first year. Yesterday was literally my last class, so I was like up last night, like putting in kids' grades, and I was grading final projects, and
wow,
the whole thing. So this
you're like a grown up now.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. It's weird. I was, it's like my, the last class, I'm just hanging out with my students, and we've got maybe 10-15 minutes to kill, and I'm just recounting weird stories from the road, like COD stories, getting too drunk, and harassing Yonan Vasquez, that kind of thing.
Well, everybody's done that. I mean, how's your family doing?
They're good. Corinne's really busy with her work. She works for this company called SpectraFlow, and they do photo retouching, and they do they work with different high-end companies that managing their printers and color management and the whole thing. And so she's super busy. And then Rio, my daughter,
your teenager,
my now 15-year-old,
oh my,
is going to the High School of Art and Design, and they want to become a professional animator. So that's my life, and then we got the dog. There's a pain in the ass, but but we love him anyway.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, dude, it is seriously way too long in between chit-chatting with you. This is an influential comic. It doesn't mean it's the only influential comic that you can talk to us about. So just know we'd love to have you back on anytime to talk about any other comic that you love.
Absolutely. I would love to.
It is awesome. All right. Well, Jamal Igle, thank you so much for sitting down with us, talking about The Killing Joke. Tom, Sal, do we have any other house cleaning or housekeeping that we need to do?
I don't think so.
We're all good.
All
right.
So.
We're going to go on a little bit of an early summer break. There'll be some episodes coming out at you soon enough. May not be back next week. We'll get a schedule out, especially to all the Patreon folks. So thank you for listening. In the meantime,
in between time,
we'll be everywhere and
around comics.
Nice. Oh, I don't have it queued up. Hold on, I'll do it. I got it.
No.
Whoops.
Wrong one. Oops. All right. Do you have it from here, Sal?
Sure.